Again, because it was so hard to find foods I could eat because I was so used to eating 3 meals a day and the whole thing. I'm like, how can I just want to avoid eating because I can't find anything that I can eat. So I looked into this intermittent fasting, and that was a whole game changer. Welcome to the Level Up Ministries podcast. My name is Joey Bonfiglio.
And I'm Sandy Bonfiglio. Thank you so much for joining us. So our podcasts are all about leveling up our mind, our health, our faith, and our relationships. Last week's episode was all about exercise and leveling up our health. And we're going to continue talking about leveling up our health with nutrition today. In the book, the first book of Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 19, it says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you were bought at a price. Therefore honor God with our bodies." And so that is our intention today, is to talk about how we are images of God and we are temples of the Holy Spirit, and how it's important to be intentional about what we do with our bodies so that we can fulfill God's plan and purpose and have energy and do all the great things that He has planned for us. And so in your book, How to Build a Level Up Mindset, you talked about exercise as being one of those ways to help level up our health, but also nutrition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so going through the health issues I was going through a few years back, one of the things I ran into was a food sensitivity, some food allergies, and at the time this was before the food allergies were kind of a thing, and again I never thought I would be susceptible to that. I was like, food sensitivity, that's ridiculous. But sure enough, it was after a time period where I was running, and I would run all the time, but after a certain point, I was getting this it wasn't a rash, but it was like it felt like pins and needles on my shoulders, and after I would shower from running, and it seemed like the more I would sweat, the worse it got. It went down to my legs, and so anyway, I went to see a few doctors. My doctor had retired, and nobody could figure it out. They thought it was like contact dermatitis from laundry detergent. Remember, we changed our detergent, then we had no detergent, and it's a whole thing. And somebody had recommended a naturopath, so we went that route. And I wasn't even 3 minutes into telling her what was going on, and she says, "Oh, we'll do some blood work, but I'm pretty sure you have a food allergy." And that never even occurred to me, like a food allergy, So sure enough, we did the blood work, and it came back, and I still have this packet. It was a pamphlet, and it had all the results and all the food groups, and basically it was a level from green to red, a scale, if you will, and in the middle was yellow, and it listed what was anything in the red was I should avoid and had high sensitivity to. So what was interesting was at the time I didn't realize I had just started eating these shaved almonds.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was being healthy, and I'm sure for some people they can have almonds and without a problem, but it took a while for my body to kind of because I was doing it for like a month, and it only had started it started like maybe 3 weeks after, so I think I built up this like thing in my system that anyway. So the other two things were gluten and soy.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even believe that until so I figured, okay, I've heard of peanut allergies, so I avoided those, but it wasn't until we went to the Cheesecake Factory, and I had pasta and bread and cake, and then I was curled up in a ball for 6 hours. I will never forget that Saturday, and it just felt like there was a knot in my stomach, and somebody was just like pulling on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew at that point, like I really had to take this serious, and so I started just eliminating everything and kind of building my way back up. But the hard part was everything, or what I deemed everything.
Being an Italian,
Yeah.
it's hard to stay away from gluten.
Yeah.
So everything that you loved was pasta.
Yeah. And really, like soy is in soybeans, and soy is like, forget candy. That's almost out of the question. You can't find candy that doesn't have soy in it. So not that candy's good for you anyway, but so that set me on this whole new path where, again, looking back, I thank God, because it made me conscious and more aware of what I was putting in my body. way back when I was working at the insurance company, when I was working for Aetna, I mean, we used to have like the cafeteria would have Thursdays were like homemade pasta. They make it and you put anything you want and then whatever. But I mean, just in general, it was like there. And again, there's nothing wrong with pasta, but too much of anything, and that's what I think kind of led to my issues. But again, it put me on a path where I started to eliminate those things that were causing inflammation, and it allowed me to do more research and be more focused and intentional about what I was eating.
Yeah, we had done another podcast on using it for good, and I think for both of us with our health journeys that God has really used that struggle for good. And at this point, we've learned so much. As much as we hate that we can't eat certain things, but we've learned so much, and a lot of the things that we have found that we can't eat aren't good for us.
Right.
And so that piece is just really important to know. And I think that's something that I've come to realize, during my, I have chronic Lyme, but a lot of my symptoms have gone away. So I'd like to consider myself as not having Lyme, but I do still have some symptoms, and there's still things that I need to work on. But I had to really rebuild my digestive system because the Lyme just really impacted my stomach and my intestines and my liver, and everything was kind of backed up and just inflamed. And so I really had to remove all inflammatory foods and kind of start from scratch. And I found that gluten and soy in particular, that those were things that not only made me feel incredibly tired, but it also made me feel almost a little bit depressed.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I think it's important to know our bodies, to know what works for us, and to just also see how we feel when we've had certain things, because I did not realize that food impacts us so much emotionally and mentally. Yeah. And I think we've learned a lot about that on this journey as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because part of changing my diet, my routine was I in the research I did, I started doing intermittent fasting. Again, because it was so hard to find foods I could eat, but because I was so used to eating 3 meals a day and the whole thing, I'm like, how can I just want to avoid eating because I can't find anything that I can eat. So I looked into this intermittent fasting, and that was a whole game changer too. And that was one thing that I started slow too. It was like this incremental process where, again, I wasn't big on breakfast, but let's just say I had breakfast at 9, and the last snack I had was at 8 o'clock at night. I kind of just incrementally shortened that window over time. So after 1 week, I would start at 9:30 for breakfast and still end at 8, and then the following week I would go 9:30 to like 7:30 as my last snack, and then I would just kind of keep shortening that window from the front end to the back end until I got it down to, I was doing a 20-hour, a 19-hour fast, and then I got it down to a 20-hour fast, and that was like kind of a game changer. But to your point about how food impacts our emotions sometimes. So every once in a while I'd have a cheat day and whatnot, and I would still, during the cheat day, I would just try to eat outside, or I wasn't as conscious about eating within those goalposts, but I would still try to avoid soy and gluten because of the impact it would have, but not realizing as soon as I would have it, shortly after I'd have like neck pain. It's like the inflammation would come back. And even worse was the next day I was like moody, so and it was like, and I didn't feel as like energetic and like ready to go, and it could just be a simple like burger with a bun, it's like, it's not a lot of gluten, it's just enough to throw me off, and then I'm like, why did I do that? Because you forget, I'd go on these good streaks, and then it's like, oh, I could just have that cookie or that brownie or whatever, and then it was like, man, I feel terrible, and that's just to show like how far, I had come, from where I was to that point, because then once you get in this good groove, you take for granted how good you feel. Yeah. And it's yeah.
Yeah. And so for us, I think like those inflammatory foods, especially of gluten and soy, those were two that we feel like we just had to remove, not just for us physically, but also for us emotionally. And I know for myself, I tend to eat more fruits and vegetables. Like that's what my body likes. All of us, our systems are different, and so it's just important for us to eat what works for us, what makes us feel good, what gives us the energy to be able to sustain and do the things that we need to do throughout our day. And so for me, fruits and vegetables and just a little bit of chicken or turkey here and there is what makes me feel good. And I know, throughout this process, we've done so much research, and one book that I had read was, the blood type book that talked about how with different blood types that there's certain foods that people just digest better, that just assimilate better. And, I do feel that there might be some weight to that in that for you, you're an O blood type and your body really does well with meat,
Right.
where I'm an AB and my body doesn't do as well with that. And so that's just something to look into as well, to just make sure that we're giving our body the fuel that it needs to be able to level up in our health and have energy and do what we need to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, because I'm what is my type O?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've just converted to this carnivore lifestyle, and again, it's another game changer on my health journey, which is crazy. But it allows me not to be as strict with my intermittent fasting. I'm still trying to be conscious about it, but from an inflammatory and health and physicalness, like as far as like strength goes, it's like now I feel like not only do I have energy, but it's like I have strength, and which is a game changer as well for me. But the one thing I want to add too is along the journey, one of the things I found out, and this is kind of like I almost call it like a life hack, or is that it takes 4 to 6 hours for your body to process a meal. And I was listening to this Rich Roll podcast a few years back, and he had a NASA scientist on, and he was talking about how your body, so there's stages that your body will digest food. So he gives an example of a wedding, because that's where you could partake in all the different food groups, right? So for an appetizer, you might have wine, some type of alcohol with cheese and crackers. Then for the main course, you're going to have a protein, and then some carbs, whether it's vegetables, potatoes, and then you'll have a dessert, cake, which is your sugar and stuff. So the way your body processes that meal is the first thing it looks for is alcohol. Okay, so we have some wine. Okay, it's going to process that first. Then it goes to your amino acids, your protein. And so where's your chicken, your steak or whatever, it's going to process that next. Then it's going to go to your dietary carbs and your starches, and your vegetables, and it's going to process that. And then last is going to be your fat, the sugar that comes from fat. So what happens is, let's say you go to a wedding, and let's say it's a early afternoon wedding, and you've left the wedding, but it hasn't been the full 4 to 6 hours, and let's say you're in hour 5, and your body's processing that sugar fat from the cake or whatever, and now you stop and you get some other type of food, and it doesn't matter whatever it is. Let's just say it's a cheeseburger. Your body's gonna say, oh, I got this new item coming in. I haven't finished the whole cycle yet. Let me store whatever I haven't finished as fat while I go break this down. Is there any alcohol in this burger? No. Is there any protein in it? Yes. So it starts over and goes through that process, but meanwhile it never processed that sugar or the fat from the cake or whatever, so that gets stored as fat. You start compounding that throughout the day and not giving your body that time to run through the process. That's how you're gonna start gaining weight. And
Well, just feeling too. I mean, when you start, when you eat too much, or when you're eating things that your body can't process well, you just don't feel well. And I think that's where we kind of get stuck, and God didn't want us to live a life with no energy and being sick. I think that God has good plans for us, and it's just so important for us to be conscious of what we're putting into our bodies, how we're putting it in our bodies, but taking baby steps. It's important to not just go hard and go fast. We talked about that too with exercise in our last podcast, that it's important to do things incrementally, that if you notice that maybe gluten is something that just you don't do well with or causes a lot of inflammation, that you kind of start to back that off slowly, and that you find incremental ways to do that. Or with eating less, again with fasting, we're just making sure that it's done incrementally so that it's manageable. But just trying to get yourself to the next level in your health so that you can be the best that God wants you to be, and just fulfill the plans that He has. And so that is our encouragement to you today. And we thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye-bye.